Hi, this is Chris Hawkins, and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm your host Daz. This is my football and music one-on-one episodes that I've been doing for the past, I think, 4 months now. The last one was with James Walsh from Star Sailor, which was brilliant, and well happy for him and his new album doing really well. But my next guest. He's not a Liverpool supporter, but he is a football supporter, and he's a West Brom supporter. And he comes from actually my dad's neck of the woods. My dad is actually was born in Redknapp, Birmingham. So, I'm be talking to him about his upbringing and everything. But he's a DJ, he's a journalist, he's a writer, and his name is Dave Haslam. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this. I told my missus, like, I haven't been this nervous in a long time.
Well,
It's weird, Dave. Like, I've talked to some of my footballing heroes, but for you, it's just because you've been there, done that, and you've been a part of my life. I've
right.
been to the hacienda many times, and that's engraved in me. And then your musical side, with not just the DJing, but with Factory Records, with like Loving New Order, Joy Division, The Smiths, that's me as well. So it's like, looking at a little mirror image, and I reading your book, which I'll bust out now. This is one of his many books, and it's a great title too. Sonic Youth Slept on My Floor. Was that the time that you didn't have carpets as well?
Yeah, I was living in Hume, quite a grim part of Manchester, in the 1980s. The council had given up on us all, and so it was kind of like a bit of a squat, and the keys would just get passed around. People came and went. In fact, I stayed in the flat 2 or 3 times, and then kind of went off somewhere, and then came back. And those are the days I was promoting a lot of gigs, and I've always been interested in music, especially kind of at the beginning of things. When bands are young and hungry and new. I tend to kind of be more in love with that kind of thing rather than a band who've done 7 albums or something. So I was putting on a lot of bands who were at that point quite unknown and not getting that many gigs. And they, some of them have sunk without trace, but Sonic Youth is one of the bands I put on who obviously went on to stuff. But there was no money around, and I mean, I was signing on. They'd come all the way from America on a cheap BA flight. So to save money, quite a few bands would kip on my floor. And Sonic Youth were quite happy too. The Butthole Surfers, they came along a little bit later, and I think for a band who consider themselves on the edge, I was a bit surprised that they found my place a bit too on the edge, and they kind of sort of demanded that they stay somewhere else. So I took them to my mate's house round the corner, and her place was even grottier than mine, so they came back to mine. The Pastels, quite a few different bands stayed in that gaff, and it was also the place where Morrissey came round for tea. But of course, the whole of Hume got demolished, so there's no blue plaque or anything. There's just my memories written down in the book, basically.
At least you have those memories still, And talking of memories, West Brom fan, not when you think of the big boys, obviously, no disrespect to West Brom, the Liverpools, the Man Uniteds, Arsenal, and now City. I was just looking at the record against Liverpool. 152 games played, won 33, drawn 40, and lost 62. That's not actually so bad.
Well, Often it's, I mean, where West Brom are now, you know, I mean, we it looks like we're going to be in the playoffs, but I mean, I grew up. My first match was 1971. I was living near the other side of Birmingham in a place called Moseley, which was quite a kind of. It was sort of known as a bit of the bohemian area, really. There were, you know, there were some dodgy pubs and lots of students. Quite a few bands lived in that area. The Prefects and the Au Pairs. UB40 came from just down the road in Balsall Heath. So it was a bit of a trek over to the Hawthorns. But my mother and my dad, they were both Black Country when they grew up. My mother particularly lived in a place called Smethwick, which is right next door to the West Brom. And and her great-great-grandfather was the baker on Smethwick High Street. And when West Brom were formed, he became one of the directors, because back in those days, you know, the baker was a man of some standing in the community. There weren't, you know, in Smethwick back then, there weren't billionaires or lawyers or any kind of a hot shot. It was like, oh, we'll get the baker in, you know. So he became a director of West Brom when the club was founded. So there was a family connection there. And then, of course, my younger brother decided he didn't want to be like me, and he followed the Villa, still does. And then my sister, she won't mind me saying, she tended to follow the team that whatever boyfriend she was seeing at the time would support. So she'd go and watch Birmingham. She'd watch, you know, Villa a few months later. But she went out with a couple of West Brom fans, and she's now a proper West Brom fan. So 1971 for my birthday treat. I thought it was going to be a treat. We lost 1-0, and that kind of set the scene. And the thing is, I would say, if you went back to say 1978, West Brom and Liverpool were, you know, top two at that point. There was a game, I think it was New Year's Day. It was the 78-79 season or the one before, and we played. I'm sorry, I've not refreshed my memory. I think we played Bristol City on that day, and we won, and we went top, and Liverpool was second. And I mean, at that point, everyone liked West Brom because we played attractive football. You know how people sometimes say that their club has a certain way of playing, and the West Brom way was very attacking. Obviously, we'd had Jeff Astle, Tony Brown, who were regularly scoring 30 plus goals a season. At the end of the 70s, we had Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham, and you know, we played attractive football. But what we always say is what happened that season was, although we were ahead of Liverpool going into the final few games, our pitch, which people will know is possibly from general knowledge, is the highest football ground in England, you know, in terms of whatever, above sea level. And the weather's, you know, pretty shit. So our pitches, which were pretty poor at the end of the 70s anyway, it was unplayable. And the kind of attractive football we were playing wasn't suited to those kind of pitches. And we just kind of faded away. And I think that was the year, and I think that was one of the years Liverpool won the title. But at that point, I remember when I arrived in Manchester in 1980, saying that I was a West Brom fan, that was really acceptable, more than acceptable. A lot of people like great team. Obviously, the black players at the end of the 70s, it seemed like a progressive team. Ron Atkinson moved from West Brom to Man United and took some of our best players, unfortunately, including Brian Robson. But basically, it wasn't like saying, oh, I'm a Leeds fan, or I'm a Liverpool fan. The team at that point had a lot of respect for the way it played, for the fact that it was, there or thereabouts in the old Division 1. So I think if you can't, I don't know. I think a lot of people's passion for football comes from a pretty early age. So when I was in my teens, they were pretty much a top team.
Yeah, I was actually 8 years old when West Brom came to Anfield, and it was the 78-79 season. We beat you 2-1.
Right,
Fairclough scored the winner. You can't miss him, Redhead.
right, yeah,
Yeah, it was. I think that's what I kind of miss, because these past few seasons it's been nothing but like Liverpool or
yeah.
City. I think it's good that Arsenal are actually in the hunt. It kind of makes it,
Yeah, I
it's
mean, back then, I mean, Forest, Villa. I mean, like I say, West Brom were in for a fair shout in that season. I mean, there were still poor teams lower in the division, but it wasn't as predictable, and it didn't feel at that time that the money that you had to spend on players made a big difference. I mean, when we sold Laurie Cunningham, I think I think we got almost £1 million for him. Which if that had been well spent, maybe that would have made a difference. But at that time, it always seemed more like the managers made a difference rather than the amount of money that the club had. I mean, we had Johnny Giles, Ron Atkinson. We had some really good managers then, and then more recently, I mean, Tony Mowbray was great, Gary Megson, and I thought we might talk about Roy Hodgson, because he was fantastic for West Brom, really fantastic. And I mean, he was poached by England from West Brom.
I think it's taken its toll though on him. I feel bad for him. Like he should never have taken the Liverpool job. Or
what went wrong? What went wrong? Was it just that everybody else wanted Dalglish, or what was it?
I think so. I think there was that still hiccup of wanting a top manager, and then we got Roy. But I was just looking back on your West Brom managers, and I just noticed like you barely had managers that stayed for 3 or 4 seasons. Like there's a massive like names. Gary Megson, I think, stayed for 4, and that was one of the longest. So I was really surprised reading up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, so the Megson, Mowbray, Hodgson era, obviously that was pretty good. We were back in the Premiership for a lot of that. I mean, Megson took us up, Mowbray took us up, but after that point, which is, I'm probably now talking the last 15, 18 years, we've had some very, very poor managers. Pulis. Again, it was like Pulis played football that was again like what we say, against the culture of the team, and so all the people who got into West Brom in the 70s and the early 80s, who were in the main the season ticket holders, because for them to be subjected to the kind of football that Pulis played, that was just a disaster. And then we had Alan Pardew, who must be, his record at West Brom was lamentable. It's something like that. Well, you might have the statistics there, but it was like a 15% win ratio. And so so obviously if you've got that kind of ratio, you're not going to last long, basically. But the other thing is that unfortunately, we have in the last 25, 30 years become a selling club, in the sense that, we will often have, I mean, we had Lukaku for a season or two. We had, Odin Wingy, and the managers seem to go the same. The managers that stick around tend to be the worst ones because nobody else wants them. And whereas the good managers move on somewhere. So it's. I mean, my kind of interest obviously dropped off a little bit when I moved to Manchester in 1980, but I would still. If West Brom came to this sort of area, I would go and watch them at Main Road and so on. But then when my son was 13, I think again, like a lot of people, I was keen that me and my son should go to the football together. That's kind of one of the things you always, just like when you bring up a kid, that's what you want to do. So by that time, West Brom had, we were away at Stockport, away at Rotherham, So I really put my son through it. We lost we lost at Rotherham, and we lost at Bradford. In fact, I took my daughter to Bradford with my son, and we got somebody sent off after like 5 minutes and lost 3-0. And I did feel a little bit guilty on the train home, that they're living in Manchester and having to support Dad's team, and it was not fun. But they've stuck with it,
See, that I think that's the main point, though. I think these days, you get a lot of glory hunters, deciding, this team's winning all the trophies, I'll go with that. But like when you've been through the bad times, I mean, Liverpool during the, 60s and 70s and 80s were absolutely brilliant. 90s, not so much. 2000s, So I've seen it all as well as yourself. So if you stick with it, you stick with it, through good and bad times. But I mean, for you though, like how, getting back in the Premier League and then getting, knocked back down, it's got to take, its toll. I mean, you're fifth in the Championship, I think 7 points behind Southampton, which is very doable these days. But I mean, for me, the Championship, like, I love watching it because it's proper physical, hard football. In
fact, I think didn't Klopp the other day say that the Championship was an amazing league?
Yeah,
and he name checked West Brom among some of the teams. It's very competitive, but you need to go on a really good run a couple of times a season. But we struggled the first half of the season, but we could. I mean, we're not a great. Previously or normally we go up automatically. So I think the last time we were in the playoffs, we lost to Derby, which we shouldn't have done. So I don't think it brings out the best, because I think a team like West Brom, which can't really rely necessarily on, individual skill or whatever, they're very much a confidence team. If they feel good on a day and things are going well and they're putting passes together, and maybe they score early and, then they go up a level. But you could turn that right around. And if the first 10 minutes are a bit under the cosh, you kind of, the heads drop quite quickly. And they start reverting to a kind of, they don't express themselves, as managers always say, do you know what I mean? And the confidence goes. That's kind of one of the things that's sort of not helped the team recently. But, I think West Brom fans tend to find a silver lining with every cloud. And, every time we've dropped down, although it's disappointing, you then think, well, tickets will be easier to buy. We'll win more games. We'll be on the telly more. You just kind of, you make of it whatever you can, I think. And the other thing is Midlands football. I think, obviously, I'm pretty amazed at how well Villa are doing this season. But again, in the 70s into the 80s, Villa, Birmingham, West Brom, Coventry, Wolves, all pretty good teams on their day. But Birmingham particularly have just dropped. The Birmingham ground was the nearest ground to where I lived. And they got really, they had Trevor Francis playing. They had a big a pretty big ground, which would be full, very passionate. But I think it's the team that suffered the most from not just the cost of living crisis recently, but years of unemployment and poverty, and Birmingham just not having what it had in the 60s with, car manufacturing and, some kind of degree of prosperity and, full employment of a kind. And Birmingham was always, compared to Villa anyway, was always more working class following. And I think that's kind of a part of its demise. It's not being able to, keep the attendances up, keep the season tickets up, put the prices up, and as a consequence, and then obviously this season getting Wayne Rooney in, which was an absolute disaster, and the writing was on the wall. I mean, how he's managed to fake a management career, I've no idea. But yeah, so also, West Brom is a little bit like that, that part of the world. I mean, I know, Liverpool and Manchester are hardly, prosperous and utopian, but that area, has suffered pretty much with, post-industrial. It's not regenerated in the same way as maybe parts of Liverpool and Manchester have. It's not got the buzz around it. It's not got the profile. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, Liverpool's a place where loads of kids want to go to uni now. It's one of the most popular. And I can remember when Cream was around, they always claimed that students would go to Liverpool, and whether they did or didn't, they certainly do now. But Birmingham and the Black Country doesn't have that buzz about it that Manchester and Liverpool has. And partly it's just because life is still pretty grim and opportunities are quite few, and I think that historically the music scene has produced lots of great acts. When I was growing up, not so many now because there's no infrastructure. There's no media city. There's no no factory records, and the history, which obviously Liverpool and Manchester have, the music history, which sometimes is a bit overplayed and a bit suffocating, but at least it's out there in the world and people know about it. Whereas actually Birmingham's had lots of great groups, but the idea of Birmingham being a hotbed of pop music and creativity has never really caught hold. That the city's never been able to market it, if you like. So I think the fortunes of the football teams do. I think they do kind of reflect often wider stuff going on. You look at that footage of the cop in the 60s singing Beatles songs. Well, who wouldn't want to be a Liverpool fan? It's just right place at the right time. And then probably early 90s, Man United, Hacienda, all that kind of stuff. Cities get that moment, don't they? But the area around West Brom and Birmingham City, places like that, they've just never had that moment, really.
Well, I mean, you hear the news of what's going on with the fair play and stuff, financial fair play, and Leicester look like they might be getting a hit. I just find it so bizarre, like what's happening with it. When you've got Man City who have 115 charges pending. I know that's a big difference between, like Everton had one or two, Notts Forest had a few, Leicester's got a few. But, you're hearing like it could take till after the season. And that just blows my mind. How all this kind of it should be already taken care of. because
Yeah, I mean, I think the Man City thing is a scandal, isn't it? Really, it's a
I mean,
scandal. There's such a conspiracy of silence about it. I think, I mean that I mean, City fans are quite a defensive bunch.
yeah,
They, they haven't got the history of Man United. That's just. I mean, they had great. Colin Bell, great player. Do you know what I mean? They've won stuff. They played amazingly. Main Road, packed to the rafters. A lot of passion. They did follow the teams. Some of the fans followed the teams as they sunk and got relegated, a couple of times. But they've not got the history, and also, they bought the way to where they've got, and but fans want success, and if you've done those trips in, the old Division 2 or whatever, and and if you've suffered, you are a bit bedazzled at the idea of success, like the Newcastle fans are. I'm really happy they're not getting any, but there is odd conspiracy of silence around football ownership and fair play rules and money, for definite.
yeah. I think not enough is said really about City. It's kind of like put under the carpet, Uh, I get why Everton fans are pissed off. I get why Notts Forest fans are pissed off. Now Leicester fans, they're just like, this isn't okay. If we're
Because Man City have got so much money,
yeah,
they can employ the lawyers to just put obstacle after obstacle
just
to it.
appeal,
Yeah.
round and round. Now, I've always said, like, it's the players on the pitch. They have an amazing team. They do.
Yeah.
But they've bought those players because of, these fake sponsorship deals. This, I mean, it even blows my mind that some of our referees are playing in Qatar.
Mm.
During the week, and then they come and play, do the Premier League. That is conflict of interest for me.
Yeah.
That's another,
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes, people in the past who owned football clubs, there were some dodgy characters. Let's be honest. Do you know what I mean? They're not, generally football owners were, mill owners, and they were either exploiting people left, right, and centre, and so they weren't all saints for sure, but nothing on the kind of level that goes on at some of the clubs now. And as we were saying earlier, it affects the whole of the football world because it's so manifestly unfair, and it's but I mean, like I said earlier, I've been in Manchester since 1980. I do feel like in the last few years, Manchester generally has chased the dollars in a way that it never has done before. And not only are the football fans a bit bedazzled by the idea of success, you look around the architecture of Manchester now, you come in on the train or whatever, all the 40 plus stories of apartment blocks going up. It's all Chinese money, and it's all absentee billionaire Chinese owners. It's all buy to let. The rents are going up in Manchester massively. It's becoming unaffordable. But the city council really never really put up any fight against the people who are building those places, and again, kind of and exploiting the situation, and basically taking space in the city away from the people and then renting it back to them at an extortionate rate. So the sort of the murky world of money is all over Manchester right now, in lots of different areas. And in that way, I guess, City just reflect the general way that Manchester has sold its soul a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it was strange because I hadn't been back home for like 3 years, and I flew into Manchester, and then took the train to Lime Street, and just going through, Manchester
Yeah,
was just like, wow. There's
yeah,
nothing but like high rises, like
yeah,
expensive, not high rises that we're probably used to.
yeah,
It was high rises that looked really, really nice, like double paned windows.
yeah,
That's pricey for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
and it's just changed. Yeah, I mean, money's changing everything. I mean, not just football, but like the DJ world as well.
yeah,
That we'll talk about. Because today you've got to be like a social media giant to be a DJ. You have to have a brand behind it. You know,
mm,
I mean, you could be the best DJ in the world, and if you've got not a brand, then you
yeah.
probably aren't gonna, make the big time. And
Yeah.
and I mean, for you, like growing up in Birmingham, what was your like musical background? Like, what were you listening to as a 15-year-old?
Well, 15. So I was 15 in 1977. So yeah, 15, 16, starting to go out in town. It was really it was pretty good age, really. I remember, I think it was February 1978, just turned 16. I was into I was into the John Peel show. I was into reading NME. I was that kind of a guy. I was very adventurous in and hungry for experience. I kind of knew that most of what was on Top of the Pops it meant nothing to me. It just didn't resonate. Mainstream TV, I think I say in my book, I can remember sitting and watching Saturday night TV, with my folks, and it was whatever, It Ain't Half Hot Mum or something was on, and I can remember thinking, there's got to be more to life than this. And that was the main reason I used to go out all the time, because I knew there was more to life than the kind of mainstream offer. The mainstream cultural offer in the 70s was horrible. And but if you went looking, what you could find was amazing. So I'd go, to pubs, and I'd go to back rooms of this place and that place. I saw Joy Division support Dexys Midnight Runners in 1979. In like a mod club slightly out of town. I saw UB40 in the upstairs of a pub. I saw Blondie, Iggy in a club called Barbarella's. So 1 week, February 1978. I think it was the Tuesday, West Brom won away at Birmingham. All the buses got the windows smashed by bricks, but we won. And then I think it was the next day, I went to see Blondie. Now, if you're 16, just turned 16, and you go and see Blondie in a small club and you're down the front, it's almost up there with winning away. It's what you want from life. Birmingham at that point, there was a band called the Au Pairs, who I loved, quite political, fronted by a woman called Leslie Woods, who I then went on to interview. I went on to interview Kevin Rowland of Dexys, and like I say, UB40. So there's a lot of John Peel, NME type bands that were around, and so I was really into that world. I mean, Birmingham generally was a heavy metal city. It was Black Sabbath.
Yeah, Ozzy's a Brummie, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's from Rednall as well, where my dad.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's. I mean, he's. Black Sabbath were huge, and Paranoid's still one of my favorite ever records. Led Zepp. It was. heavy metal. So like the new wave kids, as we weren't the punk kids. Punk wasn't that big in Birmingham, because there wasn't really a punk band. There wasn't a band that could. But the next wave was, really healthy, lots of stuff. And Steel Pulse. I remember going to Handsworth to see Steel Pulse play. And they were probably the best British reggae band ever. So Birmingham was, the birthplace of heavy metal. It had, the best British reggae band ever. So there's lots going on, and then all these John Peel type bands. So when I got to Manchester, it wasn't like I'd gone from a cultural desert to an amazing scene. It was more of the same, but slightly upper level. But I can remember thinking that, and I was into the Manchester bands, and I travelled up to Manchester to see Joy Division and the Buzzcocks. So I knew I would be at home here. But I kind of, in my head, I'd built up all those people like Marky Smith and Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks into, they had kind of like godlike status in my head by the time I got here. And what still amazes me is that they were pretty much unrecognised in their own city, I kind of imagined, Pete Shelley kind of being, carried through the streets and, given flowers by people and just treated like the ultimate VIP. And I remember seeing him in a bookshop, just kind of like flicking through the gender politics section of grassroots books, and Marky Smith just in the pub, and bands that I thought would I saw New Order's first gig with Julian. About 100 people there in Manchester. So that Manchester scene that is now lauded quite rightly for its music was tiny. I mean, I was talking to Stephen Morris the other day, and he said, apart from when they supported Buzzcocks on tour, he said and then they played a festival in Leeds. But apart from that, he said that he thought they'd only played to more than 300 people, probably twice at most in their career. And so it was that scene was completely on the edge, really, cultural edge of Manchester. People were into Dire Straits and Status Quo and stuff like that. I actually remember going on the bus. I was living in Moss Side, and I went on the bus past Main Road when they started putting on bands, and I think it was Status Quo were playing, and there was just queues of denim-clad families, granddad, son, grandchildren, wives, ex-wives, all double denim, queuing up to watch Status Quo. And I was on the bus going into town to see some tiny band in a tiny venue, and but I didn't feel like I was missing out. I felt like, I'm going to have a great experience, but that's kind of what the power, that was how it was, and obviously now, that gig is not ever talked about, whereas, every single gig by Joy Division or New Order or early Smiths gigs are documented to death and celebrated, and everyone claims they were there, and, at the opening night of the Hacienda and blah, blah, blah. Whereas, generally the people of Manchester were just not at all interested in Factory or the Hacienda or any of that,
It's so weird. Well, I mean, a scene's got to start somewhere. I mean, with the acid house scene in London, Shroom, with Danny Rampling, and like the for me, I started like first reading fanzine. I know you had yours, but I was into Boyzone,
Yeah.
Terry Farley, because they just made it about like me, the everyday Joe. It was about football, it was about music, it was about what you wore, but it was also political and very, very satirical as well,
Yeah.
but it said the words I wanted to say,
Yeah.
and that's why, I'm curious, like for the fanzine you did, because you didn't really have football in there. It was just
Oh.
mostly just,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, it was 1983 I started it. I mean, it was mostly music, and it was kind of out there music, because the thing, like I said, I was interested in the new bands and the young bands. Like when I was talking about status quo, I wasn't like dissing the people going, but it was like, for me, it was more exciting to go to a small venue and see a band and meet, and also just to meet with, like what I call a small cell of people, cell as in CELL, where you're just like-minded folk, and, you paid 40p to get into or 50p to get into the venue, and you almost take it in turns to DJ and, lend records to each other and tape records for each other. And you, as a fanzine editor, I'd go and sell my fanzine, and the first 5 fanzines I'd sell would be to other people selling their fanzine, and it was like it was just they're little communities of like-minded people who were, and sometimes a fanzine like Boyzone kind of defines that kind of a person that is in that little community, and it's very empowering and authentic. My fanzine kind of reflected all the shit in my head, really, because as well as the music, I'd write about books and films and politics. And then I started interviewing one issue. I interviewed 3 barbers, because that was a time when there was still like old barbers in town, who'd been cutting hair since the Second World War, desperately hoping the whole short back and sides would come back into fashion. So, once ACR and Bernard Sumner started like cutting their hair, and the whole punky look was completely out of fashion, all these barbers came out of the woodwork because they knew how to do all these, all these kind of austere Manchester haircuts. And then, of course, Manchester came along and they were out of business again because everyone was growing their hair. But and I interviewed them, and it was just fantastic, hear all their stories of. So the fanzine had all kinds of stuff, but it was just, I guess it was just like me communicating my passions and obsessions with everyone else. I think that is one of the things that sort of underpin what I've done over the last 40 years, is that I'm not a very sociable person. I'm quite I like my own company, and I don't really, I don't kind of go out to the pub with the lads and all that kind of stuff, really. I've never felt part of that for whatever reason. But at the same time, I'm really interested in the world, although I live in a world of my own. And so going to gigs kind of just connects me with other people. Going to football, and then doing the fanzine was the same. It was for 40p you could get this insight into my world, and and again I did like early interviews with Sonic Youth and all kinds of people in that. And I think my DJing and my writing is a reflection of that kind of thing. It's me sharing ideas with the world, but not in a kind of, but in a way that's more, maybe it's more of a kind of gift from me, if you know what I mean. I'm like, this is the music that is turning me on. I've spent hours listening to it. I've trawled the record shops. Obviously back in the day, that was the really important thing. I put the hours in. I know I've got good ears. I've been listening to music since I was a young kid. I've seen all these bands. I trust my taste. If you trust my taste, I will play my favorite music loudly and you will enjoy it. And I believe in that process. And I think with the books, it's pretty much the same as that. These are things that entertain or intrigue me or make me angry or interest me. And I'm going to put it all down. And if you buy it, you'll feel connected, at least to me. And also, I think it will resonate with people in the same ways when I put on, when I can, when I can hear a piece of music on a Tuesday. And if I've got a gig at the weekend, the next 3 or 4 days I'll be obsessed with making that bit of music the high point of that weekend gig, even if I know that nobody knows it, even if I'm the only person who's likely to have picked up on it, because I just want to blow their mind with it and share it, and that's what my DJing really has always been about. And I think my writing is similar, really. It's that just trying to articulate things or present things in a way that will turn people on and just make their life a little bit more clear or a little bit more fun. And that's the aim, and that's the connection between all the stuff I do, I think.
Well, with the DJing, would you spend like all week curating your set? Because I know DJs are a little bit different from back in the day. You just bring your record box, actually a milk crate,
Yeah.
and you just play how you felt. Nowadays, you see DJs on planes working on their tracks and everything.
Yeah.
How was it for you because you had two separate nights at Hacienda. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't want to play, the same,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, from 86, from 86 to 89, I had 2 nights, and then I went down to 1, but then I started working at a place called the Boardwalk in 1990, which was around the corner from the Hacienda, and which I kind of helped set up a lot of the stuff there. It was just smaller, and it didn't have some of the issues that the Hacienda had in 90 onwards. And I did 2 nights a week there, every Friday and Saturday, more or less all the way through the 90s. So from about 86 to 96, I was working at least 2 nights a week in big clubs. And you're right. I mean, I liked, in some ways, I kind of overthought everything, in the sense of the kind of music I'd play. If I was doing like the 2 nights at the Hacienda, the Thursday night, which was historically a bit more of the kind of student night or the sixth form or the dole-light type night. People would get the dole money on a Thursday. A lot of students would have a day off, especially the art students would have the day off on the Friday. Sixth formers who might not fancy going out on a Saturday night, might be a bit too mainstream or whatever for them. So I kind of played a real mix of stuff. So in 86, that would be Def Jam, hip hop, party hip hop, basically, Public Enemy, and then dig into a few of the things like Sympathy for the Devil. New Order obviously kept giving me the white labels. Go on, Dave, give that a spin. And then the new stuff that was coming through, you know, First Happy Mondays EP, Trouble Funk, bits of old soul. So basically, it was a very eclectic. But the idea was it was more the type of people who were coming in. You know, they at that point they still wanted to kind of, the back wall was like kids snogging. You know, it was like that kind of it was like a transition basically from you know, the best house party ever into grown-up clubbing. It was a really young crowd. But then the Saturday night, I remember I never really talked to the management. I think I never spoke to really anyone about what to play. But in my head, Saturday night was more, especially in '86, was like hairdressers, basically. Hairdressers and their favourite clients. Because my theory was that you know, all the kind of coolest girls would be going to get their hair cut, and they'd be in there for hours. And you know, the hairdresser, you know, might be straight, probably gay. You know, where'd you go out? Have you heard about this? Have you tried that? So if you, in that 2-3 hour conversation that they have with the hairdresser, if they're talking about Saturday night at the Hacienda, then you're going to get a really cool. You're going to get some of the kids from Thursdays gravitating to Saturdays. Then you're going to get the gay hairdressers. You're going to get the good-looking ladies, and in fact, when I started Yellow at the Boardwalk, by that time I really believed in the importance of the cool girls, and I because the lads have a lot of lads in that era would have a attitude to music which was quite, not exactly train spottery, but a lot of them would be taking notes really in their minds, you know. And the feedback I would get was, you know, I don't think that's the remix. I'd have played a different remix. You know, I was in your club on Saturday and I think the instrumental's better of such and such a record, you know. Whereas the women would be like, that was amazing. Mm-hmm. They would get up first on the dance floor, and their reaction to the music would be much more spontaneous and unself-conscious. Whereas a lot of the lads were like a bit head nodding, and making a little mental note to pull me up on a track or two that they would consider to be not the right tracks to play. So when I started Thursday at the Boardwalk, Yellow, me and the other two DJs, Jason Boardman and Elliot Eastwick, I bought us a notebook, and any record that we played where women left the dance floor and men got on the dance floor, or men didn't get on the dance floor, but women basically left the dance floor, we made an actual note of it, and we decided we'd never play it again.
Smart, yeah.
So we had, I remember Rocket by Herbie Hancock, which is a great record. The women didn't like it. Whereas apparently Nothing by the Young Disciples, the women loved. So, you know, so as I say, I kind of overthought it all, but I was only overthinking it all to make the night better, to make the party better. And there was still a lot of room for spontaneity, basically. I'm giving away all my secrets here, basically.
Do you remember your first Hacienda record? Because I know you borrowed records from the hairdresser, right, in the basement, Andrew.
Yeah, and I actually took some of his gigs as well. And he was the guy that Morrissey wrote "Hairdresser on Fire" about.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because he had a very, very busy social life, and Morris's thing was, you know, he could never track down Andrew in order to get a haircut because he was kind of, you know, he was literally on fire, you know, like a You're really on fire tonight, mate, or your social life's on fire. And because he was so busy that he often was penciled in to DJ at the Hacienda, and he was off somewhere else, and he'd phone me up and say, can you do my set for me? And it was through doing that I ended up, and then I did a night at a venue down the road from the Hacienda in 85, 86, at a venue called The Venue. And that was a night I originated on a Friday. And the Hacienda were thinking of relaunching almost by doing DJ nights, because they'd done a lot of live music, and as Hooky will always maintain, lost a lot of money. So they were kind of, if we could pay DJs like 40 or 50 quid a night, and that's going to be cheaper than paying weird German industrial bands that no one comes to see, we might have a chance of making some money. So they came down to the venue to check me out, like an audition, really. And the feedback was, too many art students, but you'd be great on a Thursday. And I never minded too many art students as a kind of criticism of one of my nights, because John Lennon was an art student, you know what I mean? The Sex Pistols' first gigs were in our art colleges. There was, nothing wrong with that in my eyes. The whole new romantic thing was very art student. The au pairs were art students. So that wasn't really an issue. Anyway, so that's kind of, so I borrowed stuff from Andrew. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that it was an era when the audition, as it were, was they'd come to a club and watch you do your thing. And also there wasn't lots of competition. It wasn't like the Hacienda, people were knocking on the door of the Hacienda every day saying, can I DJ there? In fact, nobody really wanted to go near it because it was, it was renowned for being quiet. And so I started Thursdays, and then they gave me Saturdays, and I was still doing the venue on a Friday down the road with the art students. And the manager of the venue, who was called Andy the Greek, he sat me down and he was like, so what's this Hacienda Thursday, Saturday? And I said, oh yeah, it's going well. And he, although he was 50 yards away, he'd never been in the Hacienda. He said, so what's it like in there? I'm like, well, it's kind of half empty and quite cold. He said, that's what I heard. So why are you DJing there? We've got a good thing going. And he said, I'll raise your money from 50 quid to 70 quid if you will stay here on a Friday, exclusive. And I said, I don't know. I think this Hacienda thing's got potential, Andy. And
little did you know.
And so I walked away from him and did the Hacienda. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that DJ culture has changed in so many ways, but I was lucky to be probably the last generation who would get a gig purely on your taste in music and your willingness to turn up with a box of records and play them, even, whether it's full or it's half full, play them before bands, play them after bands. And that was it. No mixtape, no brand, no social media, just good taste and kind of willingness to do it. But that was the last generation where DJs were like that now. And obviously now it's completely different.
Well, how do you feel about like the whole vinyl digital age? Because I know you sold like your record collection to Seth Troxler. Was that just because you just you weren't playing because like I said with my trainers, I don't wear 80% of them, but I'll keep them. How I mean, because that's a big decision, to sell like what you've collected, because I'm sure you've got, I can imagine your record collection's got just different genres in there. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it did, and it was very much like a personal collection, but yeah, it did have like all that different whatever I was into at the time, and because I've been quite restless or hungry or whatever, or unfocused, you might say. I was buying all kinds of stuff. So Seth ended up with, probably a lot more albums by the fall than he really needed, and yeah, all kinds of alternative American bands and C86 bands, but also quite a lot of very obscure hip hop from New York, and quite a lot of early techno. I mean, my decision was, I don't know. I mean, it was a combination of things, but it was instinctive. I didn't I didn't fret about it over a period of months. Like, should I? Shouldn't I? There was no spreadsheet of reasons to sell, reasons not to sell. I just woke up one day and just put a picture of my record collection online, and said I'm open to offers. But I wasn't playing them in the club because at that point, that was 10 years ago, 8 years ago. A lot of clubs weren't set up for turntables. So people would say, I'd say, look, I play vinyl. Yeah, we've got some vinyl decks. We'll get them out for you. Don't worry about that. And I'd arrive and they'd be, well dodgy pair of turntables. The engineer putting them together wasn't used to didn't know how to weight them properly. Cartridge would be bust. The sound would be all wrong. And then people would come in, jump about, and the records would jump about, and it just kept happening. Because that revival of playing vinyl hadn't really kicked in. Mm-hmm. So I'd kind of moved off the vinyl, but and also, psychologically, I was in my mid-50s, and I think that I don't really believe in the idea of a midlife crisis, mainly because I've had crises throughout my life. So just pinpointing midlife seems a bit random. I think you have a crisis at every point, don't you? You have a crisis when you're a teenager. I mean, a midlife is nothing compared to being, 15 and, and then you have your first child at whatever, 20, in your 20s. And, that's not a crisis in terms of a trauma, but your life's turned upside down. Anyway, so I wouldn't call it midlife crisis, but there's something that kind of happens around that time, I think, in a lot of people's lives. And I think what you do is you reassess your life going forward. Your midlife crisis isn't so much about what you've done, but you begin to think, well, how much time have I got left on God's earth? And what am I going to do with that time? And my mother died when she was 52. So I was kind of aware of mortality, and I was aware of that if you die at that age, how much life you miss out on, what all the life that she'd missed out on. So I was thinking, well, this is kind of like bonus time. This is kind of the time that my mum never had, So what am I going to do? And I think there was an element where the whole Hacienda retro thing had started off, and Hooky was doing his, Hacienda nights, and they were basically, because I've talked to him about them, and he's like, we play old records, and they were. I mean, it's moved on a little bit since then, but we're playing what we were playing in 88, 89 on a Saturday night, on a Friday night, and that's what we play. And there was, and there's perennial nostalgia around the Manchester scene. And I think so when I got to that point in my mid-50s, I was thinking, well, am I going to spend the rest of my life looking back on the 80s as my golden period and, trying to recreate it and chasing that again and again and playing the same records again and again? Or am I going to absolutely live in the now and live in the future and reassess stuff, not look back, or not look back so much? So I think getting rid of the records became kind of symbolic of me ridding myself of the baggage of the past. Not because I can't, I can talk to you all night about it, and I can, and I celebrate it, and I love it, and I don't regret any of it. But the idea of waking up every day and thinking my life's not as good as it was in the 80s is psychologically not very good for you,
I think also, Dave, is it's like kind of the resurgence of the rave scene again. There's a lot more people kind of doing like the warehouse parties, but then there's the kid in me that always, because I'm on a group called like 90s ravers, and just listening to some of the people, it's like, back in our day, and it's like I don't want to be that person.
No.
That was our time,
Yeah.
and you don't need to compare like what's going on now to what's going on back then. I was there. I lived it. I breathed it. If I could, all these people, like, if I could go back, why? We've done it.
And also, I think what that kind of that attitude, I think there's a sentence that I probably ended up writing in a few of my books, to be honest. Nostalgia is a disease created by old people to deny young people their dreams. Because the implication is that what we did can never be replicated by anybody, and you're all living in a dark age compared to the golden age we lived in, which is just not true, because as I still am that person who will seek out young bands in small venues, and look for new music and try and play new music, then I can tell you that in Manchester there are better venues, there are better DJs, there are so many great groups. There's there's at least 2 or 3 new recording studios opened in the last year. There's art spaces, there's all kinds of collectives, mini festivals, and in fact it makes the 80s look like a wasteland, and so, but you still have to be curious to find it all, because if you're not curious, you'll walk out and you'll go to some really horrendous places playing some terrible music, and you won't find your tribe, and you won't find anything different, and you won't be inspired. But if you're a curious person and you go looking, then you will find stuff. And it's that implication that that things were better back then objectively, which I don't believe in. Subjectively, you're entitled to your opinion, but objectively, that's not true. And in fact, I can remember when I was in late 70s, and I was going to see all these bands, Joy Division, Blondie, Iggy Pop, Magazine, Steel Pulse, going to great parties, and there were the slightly older generation to me was still talking about Woodstock, Carnaby Street, the Beatles, and they were definitely saying, we did it all. There's nothing left to do. You missed out, kid. And I remember looking around thinking, oh, I actually do not agree with you there, And I've ended up living through that post-punk and then living through hip-hop, living through the early acid house. And so I'm kind of like, well, you can keep Woodstock. Do you know what I mean? That's your thing. But so I never, I think it's a big mistake to kind of write off people's potentials and people's futures by looking back. And I think that's, again, like I say, it was instinctive selling my records, but the more I kind of work out why I got to that point, then the more I think it was a kind of a symbolic act. And the thing was that Seth bought them, and then he took them. Seth bought 35 boxes of records, and then kind of took them to Ibiza and played them. And he'll occasionally, send me a photo of one of my records getting played in Argentina or Japan or something. So the alternative would be they'd just be sat in the basement of my house, waiting for me to die so that my son and my daughter can sell a few and put the rest in a skip. Well, they're better off in Argentina with Seth Troxler.
Yeah, sending you photographs.
I mean, I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am in that scenario. But
well, I think it's brilliant though, because I know was it 2016 you interviewed him and he played some of your records on stage, right? While you were doing it wasn't a club, right? It was
we did a Q&A in a music conference in Ibiza. And yeah, we got really deep on it. I mean, Seth is really genuine guy, big music fan. And the audience were mainly at this music conference, I would say, kind of serious German techno boys come to listen to Seth with their backpacks on. And he picked out, I think he said he picked out 2 records from my collection. One was A Certain Ratio Flight, which is produced by Martin Hannett, which is, I mean, the is fantastic record even now. And then a track by a band called the Marine Girls, which was the band that Tracy Thorn from Everything But the Girl was in before Everything But the Girl. And so the German techno boys were forced to listen to these 2 songs. And but yeah, we talked a lot. We found a lot in common, and we did a night that raised 4 or 5 grand for mental health charity. We DJ'd together and raised some money for mental health charity. So, I've never regretted selling the records at all. Not for one moment. I mean, and he got them all. He got a full album with that Mark E. Smith had got a pen to and had written "I love you, Dave, Mark and Dave forever" or something. Late one night, and so Seth's got that. I haven't got that anymore. And he also he got occasionally people post on Facebook or whatever. Remember this? Bet none of you remember this. It was, this was a classic. This is brilliant. People should know about this. Some record from years ago, and I just comment, Seth has this record, because he's ended up with loads of obscure stuff, but he loves it. So, and the music is still there, and The only thing is, he didn't. He took all the 12s and all the albums, but I've got all the 7s. So I've actually got 3 gigs this year, playing 7-inch only sets.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm glad you said that, rather than that's mad, but because I do think it's kind of quite cool that it's not the easiest option or the most lucrative option. Dave, will you come and DJ for us? We'll put yellow and black stripes all over the flyer. No. But I will come and do a 7-inch only set and play a load of obscure early Mute recordings from 1981. So I don't get paid particularly well for that kind of a set, but why not? Really, why not?
Well, I wanted to ask you. I mean, you've kind of done it all. I mean, you've DJ'd for Stone Roses at their big Blackpool gig, which still to this day. I mean, I'll put it on YouTube and watch it. Obviously, I'm not going to be one of those "I was there" bollocks. I was nowhere. Well, I mean, I was in outside of Liverpool, but not in Blackpool. But it just looked like an amazing gig, but it looked like a movement.
Yeah,
like everyone was together. And
funnily enough, that gig was reviewed by Bob Stanley in Melody Maker and Stuart McConey in the NME. I mean, those guys know what they're talking about, and they both reviewed my DJ set as well as the band. That was like the change in that was the part of the new culture. There's not, in all the reviews ever written about the Smiths or no one's reviewed the DJ warm up set. Do you know what I mean? But then it became part of the experience. People would kind of come in, and my job there, and then obviously I did Spike Island, Alexandra Palace, Hacienda. I did 4 gigs with them. And you've got a very specific job, which is just to set that vibe so that when they come on, it's less like the perfect moment. So they reviewed the DJ, which was fantastic, and the atmosphere. Blackpool was my favourite Stone Roses gig of them all. Something very special. Again, the crowd were really young. I mean, I noticed it even more at Spike Island. That was 1990, so I was 28. So that means that Ian and John were probably 26. But I would say the average age of the crowd was 18, 19. And that's when there's that's when there's a change in the culture. When like I said before, it's almost like their Woodstock. It's like their moment. That is it's going to be their abiding memory. It's their formative years, and they found their favorite music. They found their band to follow, and that's a great age to discover yourself, a lot about yourself. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. In fact, there was more energy and excitement in the crowd than there was kind of on stage at Spike Island. But yeah, Blackpool was different. Blackpool was great. Alexandra Palace. The band didn't like the Alexandra Palace gig. They were really, really disappointed with it. But Blackpool absolutely all came together.
Yeah, well, I Am Your Resurrection. Just especially the kind of the longer version. Then on the 7-inch, you only get like 4 minutes of it, and it's like a 9-10 minute, like John Squire just going off on the guitar. But just seeing Ian playing with the drumstick on the edge of the stage, and from what I read, you couldn't even get off the stage, so you saw the whole gig from behind the stage.
Well, because they'd set up the DJ. I mean, that was the other new thing. It was like the Roses, another band, James, were the same. They asked me to DJ at Blackpool and Brixton Academy and GMEX. But promoters, like old school, well, you don't have a support band, you've got a support DJ. Yeah, okay. Where do we put the DJ? Well, on the stage. Well, where? I mean, there's been a few times when I've played with bands and I've been like quite at the center of the stage, and then the band are about to come on, and they've got the DJ thing on wheels. So I'm literally kind of stood there, and I'm pushed to one side on wheels, which is a bit undignified. But I kind of prefer sort of being half hidden, really. So at Blackpool, I was behind John Squire's amp. And that's good because you can kind of see the band about to come on. You can just make sure that, I mean, I think I played with DJ for Ian on one of his solo tours. And my last song was Fight the Power, Public Enemy. Oh, and honestly, Ian was just so energized by it, and he kind of bounced past me, sort of, just like, yes. So, and my mate Steve Cresser, who was nominally John Squire's guitar tech, and he's visible on quite a lot of footage of the Stone Roses. He was there, so me and him were. He was in front of me, but we were both basically behind John's amp. But because I was on stage and they had all this equipment, I couldn't get off. So I'm literally stood at the back of the stage for the whole of that Blackpool set. So obviously you could, I mean, I've never experienced anything like that because it was the crowd. I mean, that's. That from DJing, obviously that the chemistry that you can create in the atmosphere, you and the crowd together, is what makes it great. You can't create that atmosphere without them buying into it and adding to it and contributing to it. And the way the crowd reacted to the Roses was kind of just like that, really. And it wasn't so much the noise; it was almost some other kind of psychic energy. I mean, I know I'm talking like a hippie now, but I can kind of feel it, felt it, almost like buffeting me. Mm-hmm. Just whatever was in that room, it was. It was brilliant, and it was 35 years ago.
I know, isn't that mental? Like, it just seems like yesterday. Like
the other weird thing about that is that when you DJ, I still think of it as not a blag exactly, but I'm like, people are paying me, or I don't travel the world exactly, but I get gigs in Paris or Italy, and but you don't realize you often don't realize how much of an impact you have. And then in fact, it's happened to me a couple of times in Paris recently. I did a night there, a club called the Locomotive, in 89 and 90. And in the last few years, I've met two people in Paris who said to me, I used to come and hear you at the Loco. And I remember one time you played, and they kind of reel off what I played. That night wasn't just another night out for them. It wasn't like a blurred memory. It was the same as if they'd gone to see a band. You could have had that conversation with somebody. Yeah, I remember when I went to see whatever, the Smiths, and they played for an encore. They did a cover version of and I can remember it like it was yesterday. There's actually people who can remember what I played 35 years ago, which is, I'm still trying to process that, really.
Well, must be a great feeling because, I mean, how it is, Dave, these days. A lot of people blag and say, like you said, oh, I was there and all that. And you weren't. You probably just got on YouTube and, you just need to Google stuff. But like you can tell when somebody's telling the truth and it comes from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I mean, it sounds like I'm being like ultra modest, but I remember before the Hacienda, so it's like before I did the venue, I did I worked with some other guys who were in a band called Big Flame, and we did the occasional night at a tiny club called the Man Alive. Probably held about 150 people. The dance floor probably held about 30. In fact, I think that's where I was going the night I saw the Status Quo queue. And we put bands on, and then once a month I would DJ. And we just did it because why not? And I had my fanzine, so I had people I got to know through my fanzine. And they, we all lived in Hume, which was close to the venue. So our friends had just come in, why not? And there was a pool table and all that kind of thing, make a night of it. And then one night, these two girls came who were dead young. And we looked at each other and were like, who are they? And it was the first time I'd ever DJ'd and to people other than my friends or friends of friends, two complete strangers who didn't know anyone in the room, had heard that it was a decent night and they were from Chorlton, because obviously we made friends with them then. We were like, wow, why are you here? Well, it sounded like it was going to be a good night. They paid whatever it was, £1 to get in. And I can just remember being so overwhelmed that somehow what we'd done had captured somebody beyond our friendship circle, and you always kind of, when you're starting out, you always think people are just supporting you because, not because they feel sorry for you necessarily, but they're like, we're just supporting you, so we're going to come down to your night, do we have to pay £1? You do, if you can. But to actually, and obviously since, there's whatever, tens of thousands of people who've come to pay to hear me DJ, and not have their, not having had their arm twisted or anything, just genuinely want to come in. And I still remember that moment because I was thinking, I just thought it was so incredible. And I still think, I've got a gig in Preston at the beginning of September, a club called the New Continental in Preston. And it's the third time I've done that, and it's sold out both nights. And I do a night at the Golden Lion in Todmorden, and they're not the greatest. Obviously, they sound like they're not the greatest gigs in the world, but those gigs sell out, and there's no one there that I know, but they arrive with a completely open mind, open heart, absolute desire to have a good time. And it's always good. It's always sold out. And I still, the buzz that I get from that is just the same buzz as I got back in 1984, whenever it was, when these two sisters from Chorlton turned up, and we were like, wow, we've connected to somebody else. And, and honestly, I can say that for me, that is what it is about. That is absolutely what it is about. And, most of the rest of DJing is a pain in the ass, invoicing people, doing your taxes, organizing your transport, getting home, recovering the next day. All of that is, nobody wants to do any of that, but you do it because you've had that those hours of connecting with those complete strangers, and that is just joy, absolute joy.
Yeah, you must pinch yourself. I mean, again, you've DJ'd Hacienda, you've DJ'd, all over the place. You've had the pleasure or the pain of interviewing Morrissey. You were the first one to get the exclusive from Johnny Marr about
Yeah,
the break of Smiths, which, and to me, keeping that inside as well for Johnny for 2 years. That's just, because a lot of people just come out and go, I had enough. We hear it from Noel and Liam nearly every damn day, especially from
yeah,
Liam. How the breakup was in Paris, but with Johnny, it took 2 years, but for him to trust you that you would write the right things.
yeah,
What it's just amazing to me. You seem to have lived life on your terms, and that's the way to do it.
yeah. Well, that's great that you say that. I mean, it's like I say, it's um, I still queue at the post office to, buy a stamp like everyone else so does. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's like
The stamps don't come to you.
tonight has been. Tonight I've got to put the bins out, and tomorrow it's 3 bin day. We have 4 bins in Manchester, and tomorrow is 3 bin day, which is my favourite because you're getting rid of 3 times more shit than you do on next week, which is 1 bin day. So tomorrow I can't. The brown bin with the plastic and the aluminium, that's got to wait till next week. But everything else goes in the morning.
Yeah,
So honestly, I've spent more time than you would imagine sorting out my bins this evening, and then cooking my tea. You know what I mean? There's no
down to earth. Yeah.
you could do exclusives for Johnny Marr every year, and you still have to put your bins out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's just brilliant. Like, I mean, if anybody loves music and a really good book, again, Sonic Youth slept on my floor. Um, the Happy Mondays stuff, the fax machine story, had me absolutely rolling on the floor because I can imagine what those lads were up to during that, those days, just off their tits and like their mates doing what they did. I don't want to give too much away because I want people to, go buy the book. But any good stuff coming up for you? I know you have the is it April 10th or 11th? You have the Grace Jones book coming out.
So I mean, my recent writing project has been a series of small format books. I mean, at this point, I should kind of have one in my head and wave it. I've got one, but there's been 8. This is actually about Keith Haring, the artist, and I said to the designer that I thought the front cover should be if we could make it look like a cross between a dove of peace and an erect penis. That would be like the perfect signal for the life of Keith Haring. And I think we pretty much nailed it. Yeah. Will if the podcast get taken down for me saying erect penis?
No,
you can see it. Now I've shown you, you can see it.
You've said it twice now. So, yeah. Well, also looks like a peeled banana.
Okay, thank you. So I've done 8 of them. I mean, and there's they're a sort of 2 or 3 hour read, and I've done them on various topics. Pablo Picasso's Paris nightlife, Courtney Love in Liverpool, the whole story of Courtney being in Liverpool, 1982. And what she got up to, including jumping in the van when Echo and the Bunnymen came over to play the Hacienda. So she visited the Hacienda in the early months when it was open in 1982. It'd only been open Yeah, a couple of months. And Courtney was drunk and in the hacienda. Sylvia Plath. So yeah, I mean, they're all books based on things that I always wanted to write about. And the Grace Jones book, which is out in April, is about a story I heard that she, obviously absolute queen of disco, Studio 54, glamorous, jet setting, all of those things. And she went to Stockport, which I don't, if anyone knows Stockport, especially in 1980, it was kind of post-industrial, quite grim. And I kind of tried to imagine Grace Jones walking through Stockport shopping centre in November of 1980. Stockport as a football team doing even a lot worse than they are now. They're just drawn 0-0 in the and I think they're in the bottom half of the bottom division. Anyway, and I just wanted to, and she was there to talk to a factory band called A Certain Ratio about recording a song together, a Talking Heads song. So she met A Certain Ratio and their producer, Martin Hannett, who was also Joy Division producer. So she was in Stockport to go to the recording studios and meet them and listen to a demo version of the song they were going to work together on. And so the book is about how and why that happened, and it follows Grace Jones's life trajectory. Growing up in Jamaica, living in Paris as a model, being in New York, hit records on the disco scene, and then A Certain Ratio, young lads with good haircuts, but not much else going for them, from pretty normal backgrounds, Wythenshawe, Flixton, on Factory, which was operating in the bedroom of a house in Withington. So 2 different worlds, basically. But so I sort of track how they came together and the whole process. And I love doing it because it's an era of music that I love. And it's around the time that she wrote an album, or she released an album called Warm Leatherette, which is a great album. So the book is called Strawberry and the Big Apple, Grace Jones in Stockport, 1980. And she'd actually been to Liverpool earlier in the day. So that's even more reason for people to buy it, because that's totally undocumented. And there's a photo of Grace Jones in Liverpool in 1980 boxing with John Conte, the boxer, and hanging out at the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool. So so my books tend to be about untold stories, which seem to have like a bit of a meaning and a bit of resonance, in the same way, I guess, as I love to play unheard music that also has a bit of resonance. It's a challenge, but I think that's important. A DJ could play the top 50 dance tunes of the moment, one after the other, and they're never going to be interesting, and they're never going to have a career. Or you write books that are basically rewriting various Wikipedia entries, but that's not interesting. So just going that little bit further and finding something a bit out there, I think, is really important. So I'm in Liverpool at the end of May at Leaf. Yeah, I'm at Leaf doing a book talk. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's the 27th of May.
I
Uh,
might actually be back home because I'm hoping to be celebrating the league title and winning the Europa League. So,
and yeah, and waving goodbye to Mr. Klopp.
see, Dave, you shouldn't have said that. I've put that in the back of my mind for the next 3 months. You've just woken it up again.
But also, West Brom might have got through the playoffs.
You know what? I wish the best, and again, we're all going to be looking at like what's going to happen with Leicester, because if Leicester get docked
Yeah,
10 points, that's going to change the whole,
yeah,
league table. So
yeah.
I wish you the best for that. But I wanted to leave you with this because I really do like this quote. When you met Thurston Moore, well, you met him a few times and he didn't remember meeting you. And it is kind of like, don't meet your heroes. And then you saying you recollected of each other tells us a lot about the hero fan relationship. You changed my life, but I didn't change yours.
Mm.
That's it does sum up like how we put people on a pedestal,
Yeah,
and we buy all their records or we buy all their books, all their art, and they don't really know who we are, why we think we know who they are.
yeah. And just the way that people with a book or a record or an album or a photograph or something can just change your life. It's and changing your life, making the world a better place. Which should be the project we're all engaged on, but sadly isn't always.
Yeah, you turn on the telly and it's just all bad news. That's why looking my football takes me away from that. Music takes me away from it. So, Dave, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.